founder of The Lever, friend of the show, David Sirota, addressed Democratic politicians in a recent tweet, saying he doesn't want to hear Democrats in politics say it's on us to elect more of them. He wrote, "You're in power. It's on you, cowards, to figure out how to do the things you promised."
This comes in the aftermath of the tragic massacre at Robb Elementary in Uvalde, Texas, that occurred this past week, where 19 children and 2 adults were shot and killed by an 18-year-old gunman.
Host of the Katie Halper Show podcast and co-host of the Useful Idiots Rolling Stone podcast, Katie Halper joins in to weigh in. Hi, Katie. Welcome to the show. Thanks for being
so much.
here.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So what do you make of this statement that it is up to us? You know, the Democrats do continually say over and over, elect more of us, and then we can finally get stuff done. What do you make of that sentiment? Do we need to just be electing more of them, or should they just be doing their job with the people we've got in there?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with what David said. David Sirota tweeted, and it's notable that I think probably he was responding in part, at least, to Chuck Schumer's response to this tragic shooting, where he said, Americans can cast their vote in November for senators or members of Congress that reflect how he or she stands with guns, with this issue at the top of the voters' lists. So that's what he said, as opposed to saying that he would actually do anything about it. And of course, as AOC brought up, which is a very important point, Democratic leadership spent their time and money and resources stumping for Henry Cuellar in a congressional Texas race against Jessica Cisneros, and Henry Cuellar gets an A rating from the NRA. Jessica Cisneros does not. He's also obviously anti-choice, as we know, and it's ironic that the Democrats and leadership is calling on people to vote for them more, because abortion and guns are supposed to be 2 of the issues that make Democrats stand out from Republicans. Now, we have a Democratic majority, Democratic president, and yet they're not doing anything on those 2 issues. So clearly the issue is not voting for more of them. The issue is actually having Democrats with a backbone, which we don't have.
And to be clear, it wasn't just that Cuellar beat Cisneros. It's that he squeaked by with just a few hundred votes, which I saw David Sirota also tweeting about, is pretty solid proof that but for the interventions from the Democratic establishment, people like Nancy Pelosi, Jim Clyburn, who were actively phone calling, stumping for them, going to Texas to stump for him, et cetera, that it's likely that the pro-choice, pro-gun reform candidate would have won. So what do you make of this? These are 2 issues that are now being trotted out as inducements for Democratic voters to come out to the polls in November. Is there any indication that it's going to work?
I mean, I think it's a losing strategy. Why would people turn out for these issues when they see leadership? I mean, I guess the saving grace is that people don't follow this stuff too closely. I mean, that's what the Democrats will be running on. But I think it is so pathetic and so offensive and insulting to watch them do this. Just undermines all of their reasons for people to vote for them. Why should we be voting for them? I mean, it's so absurd and obscene that the leadership actually goes out of their way and intervenes in this election, which, as he pointed out, but for their intervention would have gone to Cisneros because it was such a close race. But the Democratic leadership, they're so shameless that they don't even care about the optics of this, going out of their way to help elect an anti-choice, anti-gun safety incumbent.
But did they go out of their way to protect someone like Cuellar because of his moderate or even conservative views, or just because he's one of the team, right? They just protect the people who were there already to some extent.
Well, no, I mean, it goes hand in hand. Those 2 things go hand in hand, and there are incumbents who Nancy Pelosi has not backed, despite the fact that she pretends that it's all about incumbents. I think she did that in the case of the Joe Kennedy race, for just one example off the top of my head. And so I think it's, there's this like tribalist team blue, but I think that, look, the primary between Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders, obviously, was the primary between someone who Biden dismissed as being all talk and just utopian ideas, and Biden was the one who was going to get things done. That's what he and Clyburn and Pelosi all said, and Clyburn, of course, and Pelosi were two of the people, along with Steny Hoyer, who stumped so hard for Cisneros. And it turns out that Biden can't get stuff done. That's what he ran on, and he can't get stuff done. And so you had someone who was an actual progressive who excited people and promised to get stuff done. And the only one we've seen not able to get stuff done is Biden.
So let's talk about what kind of stuff what kind of stuff are we talking about with getting stuff done? Because Senator Ted Cruz accused Democrats in the media of politicizing the shooting, saying that gun legislation doesn't work. So if he thinks gun legislation doesn't work, I mean, my big question to that is, and maybe that's right, maybe that isn't, but how would we know? I don't know if we've even passed any sort of gun legislation or gun regulation. I mean, Katie, what kinds of things do you think voters are looking for Democrats to actually do?
Well, I think that Ted Cruz probably drafted that tweet on the back of an NRA check that he got. We should remember that he gets tons of money from the NRA. And this whole idea of not politicizing tragedy is so absurd and obscene, because who's politicizing this tragedy? The people who are defending the status quo with gun violence. I mean, the outlier in the United States is not mental health. As much as we do need to work on our mental health and healthcare system, the outlier is guns. I mean, conservatives love to pretend it's like the one time they care about mental health is when it comes to shootings. But, Ted Cruz himself is obviously politicizing this. He's going to an NRA conference, which is like, if they had any shame, they would have canceled that. But again, much like the Democrats, they're shameless in their own way. They're actually much worse, obviously, on this issue. But the point is that Democrats are supposed to be better on this issue, which they are in lip service, but not when it comes to actually stumping for their candidate.
Complaints that it's being politicized always ring somewhat hollow to me, because everyone is doing that, right? It's not one side is politicizing it and the other's not. Ted Cruz himself, in fact, went on a borderline crazy rant about how the fact that there's more than one door is like the reason. Then Democrats have the pro-door agenda, has blood on its hands, which is just like
he's pushing door control. That's
right, and he's pushing door, and he absolutely came up with this idea 5 seconds ago, and then is ranting about it as if this has been his singular issue throughout his entire career.
Also, he may want to, if he cares about safety, he may want to talk to a fire department about the one-door policy.
Right.
I was just going to say that exact thing. You know, it seems like a good idea to have one point of entry until a fire happens, and then you can't get people out when you absolutely need to.
One point of entry, a moat, and then slits for crossbows and for pouring boiling acid on people who are not supposed to.
Well, it's like Zoolander. Remember Zoolander, the school for little kids or the school for little people? Where
How are we supposed to teach them to read if they can't even fit inside the building?
That's
my favorite lines.
Yeah, that's what they should be doing for schools, obviously. Make them small enough that the shooter can't get in them. I mean, not to be too glib about it, but that's about as ridiculous as the suggestion that we're hearing from Ted Cruz.
Yeah, I do feel like we should talk a little bit about the fact that the only reason that, Democrats are in this posture of we can't do anything, we don't have enough votes, et cetera, is because there is a complete failure of bipartisanship. And I think one of the other kind of false flags that get put out there, along with we shouldn't politicize this, is, we really need to have bipartisanship. Why won't the Democrats do bipartisanship? It's something that Republicans will say all the time. And then we see over and over again that even on issues where there's a lot of support for really basic gun control measures, even among a lot of conservative, moderate voters, the elected officials don't fall in line. There is a disjunction between what they are willing to do and what the people that they represent want. If this, Katie, if these kind of events aren't enough to shame politicians and galvanize politicians to even just coming to the table and having a discussion. Hey, if they think it's a mental health issue, let's see the mental health legislation. If even this isn't provoking those kinds of conversations, what do you think the future holds, not just for Republicans, but for Democrats who think that they can continue to fundraise and win off of the idea that eventually they're going to be able to get a majority to pass something and get something done?
Yeah, I mean, we saw that nothing really was done in light of Sandy Hook. And if the murder of children doesn't move politicians to do something, it's what on earth would? I mean, maybe the elections we should be talking about aren't the ones in November, but are the primaries, and that we actually have to make sure that we primary these people who are so ineffective and so gutless and just defend the status quo. Maybe Schumer was right about elections, but just wrong about the kind or the month.
Well, Katie, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me.
And we'll have more Rising right after this.